Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your host Sam Foote.
And Armstrong.
If you're new here, we're a pair of Azure and Microsoft 365 focused IT security professionals. It's episode 5 of season 6. Alan and I recently had a discussion around Defender for databases. In this episode, we dive into the world of database security with Microsoft Defender for databases. Join us as we explore how this tool within Microsoft Defender for Cloud can transform your approach to safeguarding your data against cyber threats. We've noticed that a large number of you aren't subscribed. If you do enjoy our podcast, please do consider subscribing. It would mean a lot to us for you to show your support to the show. It's a really great episode, so without further delay, let's get started. Hey Alan, how are you doing this week?
Hey Sam, not doing too bad. How are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. Really good. Anything new in the world of, I don't know, security, Microsoft, Defenders, etc.? Caught your eye this week?
No, I don't think so. It's pretty busy at work to sort of come outside of everything else, to be fair, at the moment. Plus the woes of attempting to move house. Got MVP Summit next month.
Oh, nice. You going out?
No, not this time. Due to house move.
House move, yeah.
Bad timing, probably.
No, that's totally fair. Can you join just remotely?
Yeah. It won't
Nice.
be the same, but I'll get the intel, which is good.
Nice.
What about you? Is there anything else? Anything this week that's caught you?
No, I had a scary conversation today about app compatibility, i.e. compatibility modes in Edge, unfortunately, which was quite interesting. I was like, this isn't something I've talked about for a long time.
I was going to say.
Yeah, I know, which was quite exotic. It caught me off guard. Then again, I don't really mind those conversations because I'm like, yeah. So, yeah, that was quite an exciting part of my day. I also discovered an Intune management tool. I don't know if you've seen it. It's on GitHub. Sorry, I can't remember who created it. I believe it's like an MVP. But it's essentially like I think it's a desktop app, and it connects into your I think it does a Graph API connection and pulls all your information from Intune, so you can edit things in bulk. Sorry, I hadn't seen it before, but I was playing around with that in my lab last night, I think, because I hadn't seen that, which was cool.
Nice.
Yeah, it's got its own way to sort of bulk, sync and update policies, basically. So I thought that was quite cool. But apart from that, I don't know. I think, I don't really know. I've also been doing a lot of Defender for Office as well. So I've been, I don't know. I must have made about 80 PowerPoint slides this week so far, something like that. So it's been a bit mental from that perspective. But no, apart from that, it's it's just business as usual, really. I'm quite lucky because I obviously moved house over a year ago now. It's crazy to think that, but yeah, I don't envy you, Alan. I know that process of buying and selling houses. It's
Well, it was going okay.
But the thing is, I think house buying and selling is like in the UK anyway. It's just like minutes away from failure, isn't it? And falling through, like it's until right at the end, you're like, oh yeah, I've got to fall in love with this house, spend more than I've ever spent on anything else, and then it can just be ripped away from you, sort of at any moment, for any sort of reason, right until the last minute. Well, relatively the last minute, anyway. But hopefully that that pressure eases off at some point.
Yeah, exactly. So. Oh, cool. Okay, so what's this week's episode on, Sam?
Okay, yeah, so I'm going to cover Defender for databases, which is like I don't know, it's a subset of a subset, if you get what I'm saying, because it's like, as we might as well just start rambling about this part now, because you know how we talk about Defender for Cloud, it's like a collection of defenders.
Portfolio, yeah.
I apologize. Portfolio, of a portfolio of defenders. Well, Defender for databases is a portfolio of defenders of itself in itself.
Oh,
So
wow.
let's jump in.
Okay, so yeah, you definitely need to expand on that then. So, I guess what's in well, what is Defender for databases, and I guess how does it become its own portfolio?
Okay, so um, databases, they are used to store and retrieve data on a very basic level. Um, think, I don't know, an Excel workbook on steroids, rows and columns, little bit more sophisticated. But anyway,
Access?
access more sophisticated. Yeah, exactly. I like it. I like it. You're completely right. Yeah. So imagine. Actually, I'm not even sure listeners. A lot of listeners even want to even think about access. I believe
That's
if
fine.
they're if if they were around when access was like properly in use, they burnt it from their memory because of that time, or they simply have never used it. Which I'm kind of jealous of those types of people. Anyway, so yeah, data stores data in a structured or a semi-structured form, and it allows you to save and retrieve data from another system, essentially. So we see databases are used in all sorts of different applications, systems, programs. Um, you have little databases that are embedded, like even on your local machine. But a lot of databases are called what are called database management systems, where they're actually like actual sort of servers and application stacks that run independently, typically on some sort of hardware or sort of PaaS or even SaaS platform. So in the case of that's databases, and the only other thing that you'd really need to know about databases is that there's lots of different types of databases. There's not just one database. There's many different approaches, technologies. Microsoft have got their own proprietary database technology. There's loads of open source database technology. There's also Azure and cloud specific databases as well, which are obviously the IP of the services that run them, but they're cloud hosted and managed as well. So you just pay for access to them. Traditionally you would have created some sort of database on a server. It would have been physical originally, and then it would have been like a virtual machine that was in your data center. But now lots of people manage and sort of host their databases in the cloud, as workloads have shifted into the cloud. So why are databases important? Well, databases can store, and most of the time do store, highly sensitive information. Whether that be some sort of business intelligence, some sort of business intellectual property that you've got, users' PII data, you're sort of intertwined with that users' login information, potentially. And if you imagine for like an adversary, a threat actor, a database is like a treasure trove. You get access to a database, you've got potentially millions of records that you can start to read, exfiltrate, and mine for information. So databases are, a really sort of I would say it's one of an organization's sort of crown jewels, really, because it has the ability to have so much data. Some databases can scale up into the terabytes worth of data and billions and billions of rows of data. So you can imagine they are quite high profile targets for exploitation. And I know we had the sort of portfolio type joke around Defender for cloud, because it is a running area of confusion, I think, for a lot of people. So Defender for databases is a collection, so I don't know, a sub portfolio of further defenders because of the different types of databases that they are. So the data protection, and I will go into each one of these in a bit more depth. But you've got Microsoft Defender for Azure SQL databases, Microsoft Defender for SQL servers on machines, Microsoft Defender for open source relational databases, which has also got its own subset, but we'll get onto that, and then Microsoft Defender for Azure Cosmos DB. So, inside of this Defender for databases, we've got those 4 subset defenders, and they all focus on different types of database technology. Why? Okay, so why do we need a defender to protect, to protect these databases? And I will go into each one of them in a bit more depth, but I want to just talk about the high level sort of features and functionality that you get. When a database is being accessed, it's really important to identify potential threats that are happening whilst that data is being accessed. So if you imagine you've got a database which stores some data, and you've got an application that just talks to it, storing and retrieving data. Maybe it's a web application that people use. When there's normal communication going on there, the actions that are being performed are very, probably very similar. You've only got a finite amount of features in your application, so the data that you write and read from is, it's not, the data's not static, but the way that you access it is pretty static. Today we have lots of different SQL type attacks. Probably the most common and prevalent is SQL injection. Now, if you have a SQL injection, SQL injection is essentially where you craft an input into a web application that then gets, through a vulnerability in the application, gets injected into the SQL command that's run on the SQL server. So what typically they will do is they will use some basic SQL to stop the SQL statement that's being run, and then they will inject their own SQL statement to return different types of data through that data connector, or delete data, depends on what's going on there. But we'll go into that in a little bit more depth. So these SQL injection attacks, they are very, very prevalent. There is a lot of technology available to developers to protect against them, but they still do happen. What you want is something that is looking for those types of threats in real time for you, because looking at every single query, what's been run, and whether something nefarious has been run against a database is not something that a human could sit there and do. These databases are accessed in milliseconds, potentially thousands or hundreds of thousands, millions of times per day. So the scale of this data, because of the amount of times that it's being accessed, is just not feasible for a human to monitor. So that's why you need some element of threat protection, and I'll go into a bit more what threat protection really looks like. But I use SQL injection just as a basic example there. And then you also need to understand the vulnerability of your the configuration of your databases. So there are a lot of different configuration options, things like authentication, authorization, and RBAC inside of databases. So understanding that all of those different configuration parameters are done in a safe and secure way. So also you don't just want to look at real-time threats. You want to look at preemptive type activities, so such as vulnerability assessments as well. Because it's baked into Defender for Cloud, any alerts can bubble up through Defender for Cloud, and we'll go through alerts in a little bit more detail. But really, that is why it's contained within Defender for Cloud. You get that single pane of view all the way down into these into these databases.
Cool. So, in a summarized way, if I can, in effect, Defender for databases, whilst there's various ones underneath it, I suppose, with maybe different functionality depending on what Defender of database you're talking about.
Yeah.
In effect, it's kind of like detecting real-time threats where it can, so you're getting visibility there about access and things like that. So then, at least then, if you are being attacked or in the process of being attacked, etc., then at least you're being notified of it rather than waiting until you don't have a database or your database is found on the dark web or something like that. And then the other part is, like you said, or at least another part, is around vulnerability, your posture management, I guess, kind of thing around your database. Understand how the data inside the database is structured, things like that, and see where you can maybe make changes to it to make it more secure, less easy to find, exposing the data you maybe don't want to expose. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah. You want to attack it in two ways. You want real time threat protection, and you want preemptive, vulnerability and configuration assessment. 100%.
Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of what we generally see, isn't it? As well, it's always finding the unknowns to help you protect against it, kind of thing as well. So yeah, all makes sense, I think. Okay, so can you dive in a bit more then around the features, maybe specific against some of the Defender for database versions, I'll say, or different ones there, and their capabilities?
Okay, yeah. So the first sort of database engine that I'm going to look at is Defender for Azure SQL, because that's probably the most highly integrated, because Azure SQL is a workload, as it's named, in Azure. So it's sort of first party cloud first, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us through. I'm going to start with threat protection, and I'm going to just talk about some of the alerts that can be raised. So, first one is first alert that you can get a possible vulnerability to SQL injection. This is where it's looking at the SQL statements and whether they can be exploited for SQL injection. So it's sort of a pre-attack. It's not that there's actually a SQL injection happening now, but it's that you've got the possibility of having that. A logon activity from a potentially harmful application. So if they're looking at specifically what database connectors are being used and a known list of harmful applications, whether that's actually, if it's attempted to even access your resource. Log on from an unusual Azure data center. So this could be looking at probing from some level of lateral movement in your environment. So whether somebody's started a new connection from even inside of a different Azure data center. Log on from an unusual location. An attacker might gain access to your Azure portal. Maybe they've breached one of your management administrators. Maybe they've opened some firewall ports directly to their location, and they're now accessing it from a different location. Because a lot of these database communications are like just kind of private in Azure, if that makes sense. It's sort of behind the scenes communication. So a lot of databases aren't even accessed, remotely. Maybe across different Azure regions and availability zones potentially, but yeah, not from outside Azure typically. A log on from a principal user, so that's just essentially a privileged user, not seen in the last 60 days. So maybe you created a user ages ago, and for some reason it's now been activated. log on from a domain not seen in the last 60 days. So again, a change to an access pattern there that will be log in from a suspicious IP address. So this is where Microsoft's threat intelligence is coming in. So yeah, Microsoft threat intelligence is also included as well. I haven't really spoken about that. So that is a big benefit that you get access to, but only, as part of these alerts. I don't believe you actually get access to the full feed. It's just injected. Then we've got potential SQL injection. So this is where, there's potentially an actual SQL injection that's actually happened in your environment. Suspected brute force attack using a valid username. So this is where somebody's got a valid username, but they've tried a potential brute force attack. Just a suspected brute force attack. So they don't have to have there's a difference there between those two, where they're actually, one of them's actually using a valid user, but the other one is just let's call it a random brute force attack. It's never random, but you know what I mean by that. And suspected successful brute force attack. So a large number of failed login attempts and then actually a successful login attempt. SQL Server potentially spawned a Windows command shell and accessed an abnormal external source. So, this is where a suspicious SQL statement can actually, spawn an abnormal external command shell and access an external source. And an unusual payload with with obfuscated parts has been initiated by the SQL server. So there are some some commonly high impactful commands that attackers use, and they use obfuscation techniques to hide the use of those commands. So that's what that's looking at as well. That's the full list of SQL database alerts. So you can see that there's a lot of real time. There's looking for actual application vulnerabilities with SQL injection. There's user based brute force attacks, new user locations, and also you've also got the actual SQL server trying to spawn external access to external resources as well. So I would say that's really good coverage at the SQL level, okay? Because there are some, like web application firewalls that can detect SQL injection, right? But that does require that external resource. This is actually at the database level, so you don't have to have anything in front of your database in order to do that. Those types of systems are actually looking for like SQL injection attacks at the web application level, so you've got another layer of your defense there.
And I guess, and again, I don't necessarily know full application architecture. There's normally like a front door, front lot, and back lot. Absolutely destroyed that. I know.
A front end, and a back end.
Yeah, front end, back end. That's what I want to say. So destroyed that straight out the door. But yeah, sometimes I guess there might be a connection from the back end talking to then the SQL database, which wouldn't be required to sit in front of a web application firewall, as an example. And maybe there's some commands stored, or that's going via it that's causing it to create the SQL injection. Maybe, I don't know. I'm thinking about other things that maybe where you wouldn't have the need for a web application firewall to detect some of those things.
Yeah, exactly, because not all databases are, fronted with web applications.
Yeah.
A lot of databases sit behind, in private, networking. They may run like back office systems, batch processing systems. There's loads of different potential there. So that's why there needs to be multiple why there needs to be multiple technologies there.
Yeah, and I guess as well the going back to sort of web application firewall, that's probably in fairness maybe a more it's not necessarily unique. It's more checking, securing the application probably layer as well, rather than the database. Yes, it can detect SQL injection, but it's probably looking at all the other bits as well from the what's it called? Is it the OIS? I can't think of the framework. But yeah, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, so that's the sort of real time aspect of it. There is also the vulnerability assessment as well. So this is where you're going to get sort of posture management type recommendations that are going to bubble up into Defender for Cloud. So you can think about this like over provisioned users. And user rights management. You may have created like a let's say a local, because in Azure SQL you can use sort of local authentication, or you can use Entra to authenticate. So there may be a recommendation there to move over to Entra type authentication for your application. But if you're using like local user accounts, you might have set your application to run as like system administrator, sysadmin, basically. And what that means is that your application, even though you don't use it in your SQL, it can like drop database tables, and that means like remove database tables and things like that. So if an attacker was to be able to perform a legitimate SQL injection attack, they could then start destroying your database and your data. And I don't think I need to go through why that's a bad thing, but so the vulnerability assessment as well angle of it is really important, because before you have got that real time, so it is going to look for like potential SQL injection, right? So it's going to see your SQL statements going through, and it's going to say, hey, you could improve this, but it's also going to say, hey, you're way over provisioned on your, privileges. Maybe you want to fix that, because, if that username and password for your app does go missing, let's say somebody breaches your web server, finds your credentials. Let's say it's hard coded into your application. Oh, I shudder. But anyway, it's hard coded into your application. They get access to that username and password. What can they then do? So there's lots of different reasons to look at that posture, but that's no real different than just reducing risk with posture management in Azure anyway. Really, it's just applying the lens onto databases. The next sort of database engine is SQL servers on machines. So I think Microsoft sort of acknowledges that SQL Server isn't just in Azure SQL. There's lots of different places that you can run SQL. So you can run SQL on-premise, anywhere really, I suppose. AWS, GCP, and there is a way that you can connect Defender for SQL onto non-Azure machines. That's I'm not going to go through the nuance of all of that, because that's quite a big thing in itself. But for on-premise machines, as an example, you'll want them to be Arc enabled in order to get access to them. There is also specific guidance for Azure, AWS, and GCP that you can go through. But really, once it's all configured, the output is exactly the same of what I've really described for Azure SQL. Basically, you get the same set of alerting as part of it. So I won't dive into that too much, because that's a bit of a rabbit hole, and we've already, I don't know, probably already at half an hour anyway. So I'll move on.
Quickly, that's pretty good though, considering it's not in Azure and you get the same, or at least majority of the same experience. That's pretty good.
Yeah, and I actually think those last two ones where it's like spawning Windows processors and stuff like that, that's probably going to be more relevant for SQL servers on machines, because you're likely to be able to do that type of thing. Whereas I believe all of that's locked down in Azure SQL anyway.
Yeah.
The next one is Microsoft Defender for open source relational databases, and this is where it like delves into another layer deep. It's like, anyway, right, we'll go for it though. So there's Azure, so it'll protect Azure database for Postgres SQL. That covers single server and flexible server. Azure database for MySQL. That's also the same as with single server and flexible server. It'll also protect Azure database for MariaDB, which is general purpose and memory optimized instances. And also on AWS, which is called, their database service is called RDS, Relational Database Service, I think it's called. Yeah, I think I got that right. Aurora PostgreSQL, Aurora MySQL, PostgreSQL, MySQL, MariaDB. So, I don't know, I've just rattled off like, I don't know, like, let's call it like 10 different engines, something like that. But if you are using Postgres, MySQL, Maria, DB, which is a variant of MySQL, you have some pretty good connection options there. And also, if you're on RDS on AWS, then Microsoft wants your lunch money for that as well. But there is some differences with what you get. Let me just... Sorry, I've got about 1,000 tabs open because there's all sorts of different... So just to go through the threat protection, suspected brute force attack using a valid user. So similar to what we saw before. Suspected successful brute force attack, again the same. Suspected brute force attack, we had that previously. Attempted logon by a potentially harmful application. Logon from a principal user not seen in 60 days. So same again. Login from a domain not seen in 60 days. Same again. Logon from an unusual Azure data center. Logon from an unusual cloud provider. I think that one's slightly different. I don't think we had that one previously. Log on from an unusual location and log on from a suspicious IP. So there are still a lot of threat type alerts that you can get out of it. And what I like about this is there's just so much support for. It's a lot of it is Azure hosted instances, so you don't have that on server aspect of it. It's got to be hosted in like a PaaS type system, but you do have a lot of different options there and good coverage. The last one is Microsoft Defender for Azure Cosmos DB. Now, everything that we've talked about previously, well, that's not fair to say. But anyway, I'm going to say this. They're all database management systems that we've talked about. And they are quite traditional in the way that they process data. Cosmos DB is I don't know, let's call it like database 2.0. It's a NoSQL, it runs in different modes, but in this mode, what we're going to talk about is NoSQL mode, which means it doesn't use, it stores, it doesn't store structured data. It's a document object store. So instead of having rows and tables of data, you have documents that you store. Not like Word documents, like JSON documents. We won't go into that too much. I think we've already done an episode on Cosmos DB, I believe. Yeah, we definitely did. Yeah. A long time ago. But what we need to know for this conversation is Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL is the only supported flavor of Azure Cosmos DB that is supported for Microsoft Defender for Azure Cosmos DB. So what is not supported is Cosmos DB for Apache Cassandra, Cosmos DB for MongoDB, Cosmos DB for Table, or Cosmos DB for Apache Gremlin. Only the NoSQL flavor and variant is there. So so again, I will jump to the alerts because this is a, I don't know, Cosmos DB you can only run in Azure. So well, that's not exactly this flavor of Azure. Cosmos DB is the only one that you can't run in Azure. But I'll talk you through some of the alerts here. So access from a Tor exit node, which is quite cool. That's definitely different. We haven't had that one before. And if you don't know what Tor is, it's an anonymized proxy, which, I don't know, authenticated access to a Cosmos DB from a Tor exit node is a likely indication that a threat actor is trying to hide their identity. Not everybody that uses Tor uses it for nefarious purposes. I've got to put that caveat in there, but if you don't use Tor in your organization, which not a lot of organizations do, then it could be an issue. Access from a suspicious IP, access from an unusual location, unusual volume of data extracted, which is a different type of anomaly that it can detect, that's really cool that it's baselining your volumes of data and then looking at large amounts of data going. Extraction of Azure Cosmos DB account keys via a potentially malicious script. So this is looking at a PowerShell script that was running your subscription and performed a suspicious pattern of key listing operations to get the keys of Azure Cosmos DB accounts in your subscription. So this isn't even looking at the Cosmos DB. This is looking at Azure, which is pretty cool. Suspicious extraction of Azure Cosmos DB account keys. So somebody exports your Cosmos account keys, but potentially from a different location. SQL injection, potential data exfiltration. So there is one from an injected statement as well. And then a fuzzing attempt. So a fuzzing, how am I going to explain that?
That the fuzzy matching kind of stuff. No.
I'm just reading through the. No, I'm not gonna butcher that. But there's a failed fuzzing attempt in line with SQL injection. So I can't answer that one, unfortunately. But that is the last. Real time alert that you can get from Cosmos DB. So what is worth I've gone through all of them now. So what is worth knowing really is that it really doesn't matter what database you're running in Azure. Lots of them are supported by this tool. So if you are using it and you do want this level of threat analytics and protection, and trust me, as somebody that has had to look through SQL audit logs manually, you do want this when you are in a breach scenario or an incident scenario. You will want this amount of information in front of you because, well, A, you want to know it whilst it's happening in real time, but also if you do have a breach, you also want to have some sort of comfort and some level of confidence that your SQL hasn't been breached or your databases haven't been breached.
Yeah. Okay. Whew, so many things there.
I know.
Like
yeah.
I know. Cool. Okay. How do you enable it then? Defend for databases on the databases in Azure or AWS or on-prem, and how easy is it to configure?
I think it's. I would say for the database engines that are running in Azure, it is very, very simple. Yeah, you go into Defender for Cloud, you go into your environment settings, you select the relevant Azure subscription, AWS account, GCP account, and you can enable it directly from there. You are going to have to do a little bit more work if you've got SQL servers on machines, and potentially extra connectors into the other clouds. But there is really good documentation on that. And once Defender for Cloud has got access to those resources, it's really easy to turn on those resource types.
Nice. Okay, can you go through sort of what you can do with the alerts and sort of responding to them, that side of things?
Yeah. Okay. So I mentioned previously around they bubble up into Defender for Cloud. So inside of Defender for Cloud, there is an area called Security Alerts, and that is where you really want to be. Well, for any of your any other workloads that you've got running in Defender for Cloud, that are what we call real-time workloads that actually produce alerts. Alerts will show in there. So let's say you've got an alert for a potential SQL injection attack. You can click into it there. You can get admin notifications of those as they happen. You will see things like the affected resources, but you'll also get enriched information in that portal. So you'll see things like MITRE information about where in the attack path that is happening. You'll get as much rich information in there. So you'll see things like the SQL statement that was executed, where the client IP location is. So you get a lot of enriched information in there. What the client application was that caused it, and you also see related entities in there as well. So you will be able to understand what's going on there. So that's your details. Then there's also an area where you can take action. So that will then give you quick links to how to mitigate the threat potentially. Open the logs of the affected resources. You can trigger automated responses if you set that up through automation in Defender for Cloud. So you really have one place. Once you've enabled it, you've got one place that you've got to go in and can configure that too. If you're looking at the posture side of things and the vulnerability side, you will get recommendations in Defender for Cloud to go and clean those up. So as soon as you enable it, it will go and do its first assessment, and it will give you some recommendations to start improving the posture.
Cool. With the SQL assessment, do you still have to set that up manually against each database? I remember that being something you had to enable once upon a time.
There is there's now like an express. I'm just gonna jump back to my notes on it. Just give me 2 seconds.
I know that previously you had to have a storage account or something, didn't you, to store the data? But I think they've removed that now.
Yeah, that's gone. Yeah,
and I think you might be able to do Azure policy now as well to enforce the assessments on. I think it was something like that.
Yeah. So the classic configuration required an Azure storage account. There's a new Express configuration. So yeah, you can use a policy scope at either the subscription or server level to enable it. And you can you had more configurable settings previously, but a lot of that is now just defaulted to on. So recurring scans are always enabled. System databases scans, you can schedule them and have manual scans. So yeah, where there is essentially a new Express configuration method for that.
Nice. Cool. Okay, so the question that everyone loves is, how much is it going to cost me?
Okay, so databases. Okay. Okay, so Microsoft Defender for SQL on Azure connected databases for each instance, it's $15 per month. For Microsoft Defender for SQL for outside of Azure, it's $10.95 per instance per vCore per month.
Okay.
Microsoft Defender for MySQL, $15 per instance per month. Microsoft Defender for PostgreSQL, $15 per instance per month. MariaDB, $15 per instance per month. So essentially, all of the Azure connected database management systems, $15 per month. Outside is by vCore, $11 per month. A Cosmos DB is charged by per 100 RUs per second per hour, which is 87 cents per hour per 100 RUs. So if you had, I don't know what's the default? Is it minimum of 300? I can't remember. But let's say you had 100 RUs, which I don't think you can even do.
I think 100 is the minimum because I think that's the free tier, isn't it? That you can do.
Fine. I'm just getting my digit wrong then. So,
I think.
So let's say you had 100, which is dev test type territory. But it's per RU hour. Let me just see if I can get. Yeah, because that doesn't make sense to me because that's saying that it would be like $600 odd, and I don't think it's calculated like that.
There always has to be one that's slightly different in how it's built, doesn't there?
Yeah, per RU per second by hour. No, I don't know how to calculate that. Because I'm sure you're not paying $639 a month for 100 RUs, so
No, it's 8. So just go on the calculator. One times 100 RUs for 730 hours is 88 cents a month.
oh
It's not point.
no. Okay. My pricing table is monthly. Fine. Yeah, so it's 87 cents per 100 RU per month. Yeah. Fine. Yeah, sorry. My pricing table is display the pricing by month. So that makes more sense. So so that is actually a lot cheaper. Well, it could be. It really depends on the size of your Cosmos DB. No, the performance.
How much you're pulling from it.
The throughput of your Cosmos DB.
Cool. Okay, is there anything else, Sam?
No, I think that's it. But yeah, like I said, databases are usually high-profile targets. They usually store a lot of valuable information, and a lot of them cost a lot of money to run because of the performance metrics and characteristics and the resources that are required. So yeah, if you are looking for sort of a layer over the top of any sort of SQL protection that you may have today, then and your databases are in the right engines, in the right places, then it's definitely worth considering.
And to be fair, actually, at least for the ones that is paid per database, you might have, like you said, a 2 terabyte database, or maybe bigger instance if that's even possible in Azure and things like that. But it might be consumed. It might have like you said, millions of transactions going through it, but you're only paying £15.
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's not. It will hurt smaller instance sizes.
Yeah.
Right. So if you are an organization, but I don't know. Like, it's a lot of valuable information in databases, and to assign $15 per month, like on your production databases, that seems like a no-brainer to me. But really depends on your risk appetite.
Yeah. Cool. So I think the Cosmos DB episode was season 4, episode 17. I think when I quickly looked just now. If anyone wants to go and check out how Cosmos DB is slightly different to traditional. I say traditional or current. Depends which way you want to look at it. And the next episode is going to be on Defender for Server. So not only Defender for Endpoint, that's sort of part of it, because we've got episodes on Defender for Endpoint kind of thing. But also talking about all the extras that you can get with the Plan 2 workload or version of it, and sort of the benefits you get out of that.
Yeah, nice.
So that should be quite
really
quite good to sort of recap a little bit and talk about what else is there, because Defender for Server is probably the one that everyone knows. That's probably fair to say, I think, in Defender for Cloud. But you might not see the benefits you get out of the plan, the Defender for Server in Defender for Cloud's Plan 2 version. So yeah.
Definitely.
Cool. So did you enjoy this episode? If so, please do consider leaving us a review on Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube. This really helps us to reach out to more people like yourselves. If you do have any specific feedback or suggestions, we have a link in our show notes to get in contact with us.
Yeah, and if you made it this far, thanks ever so much for listening. We'll catch you next week.
Yeah, thanks all.